Hello there, Parth Sharma this side, bringing you chess classics, in which I'm covering top 15 games played by Garry Kasparov. Do take time to like, comment, share, and subscribe to my channel if you're already subscribed. Then do press the bell icon for future notifications. If you like my work, then you can also support me on Patreon and PayPal. You'll find the links in the description because your support is my motivation, which keeps me going. So we have looked had 8 games up till now. So we will be looking at game 7. Which game is at number 7? It is his game against Rustam Kasimdzhanov from Linares 2005, in which Rustam is white, and Garry Kasparov is black. And this is the ninth round game of Linares 2005, and it is pretty significant tournament because uh, before this tournament, Garry declared that this will be his last professional tournament, and after that, he'll be taking retirement and he won't be playing professional chess anymore. And not to forget, Garry Kasparov was number one even at that point of time also, and he was playing against Rustam Kasimdzhanov, who was the FIDE champion at that time. So that was a very significant thing because Garry Kasparov was ejected from FIDE because he made a separate organization, PCA, and then that later unified with FIDE, and there was one single organization after that. So Garry had to show that he can beat FIDE's champion, and putting a big statement in front of FIDE, like what they did in '93 when they were supposed to play the World Championship match. Him and Nigel Short was something that Kasparov didn't like, and they held their match out of the auspices of FIDE and created their own organization. Or Kasparov created his own organization, PCA, and since then he was associated with that. But anyway, forget about that. We come to this game, this 10th round game, a ninth round game from Linares, and he was playing against Kasimdzhanov. So there we go. Rustam is white, Garry is black. Rustam opens with d4, d5, c4, and c6 by Kasparov. So he goes into the Slav. Knight c3, knight f6, e3, e6, knight f3, and he decides if he wants to, he can go simply bishop e7 and then castle here. Maybe that could be better. Maybe to play a6 first, and even that could be okay. But he goes for knight bd7, the so-called Miran, semi-Miran up to this now, and we transform it into Miran, complete Miran, original Miran variation of the Slav defense, where this bishop d3 happens and black captures to get b5 and to develop this bishop on the queen side, possibly to play even bishop d6 as well. But this is a very long line. Anyway, bishop takes c4, now b5, bishop d3, bishop tucking back, bishop was attacked, and bishop b7. So the main problem here is that this bishop is somewhat caged here on b7 with this c6 pawn restricting the movement of this bishop, and in a good world he would like to play c5 and unleash this bishop on this king side. We have seen it in very famous game which Anand played against Aronian. We will talk about that later sometime. So Rustam Kasimdzhanov castles, a6, e4, and now c5. So what does Rustam do? He solidifies his center, whereas what does Kasparov do? Not only unleashing this bishop but also to strike into the center by attacking the pawn on d4 by playing c5. That's a good move. And if pawn takes, then bishop takes will help only black's development. That would be better. So Rustam closes the structure in the center by playing d5, and Kasparov continues with queen c7. So he doesn't want this d6 pawn or to be e5 to be annoying, and also wants to get once this exchange happens, he doesn't want his queen to be right in front of his own queen, because then white would be in dominating position without the queens. So anyway, d takes c6, d takes e6, f takes e6, and bishop tucking back to c2, just opening this queen's line, and that's a good move. This is all pretty much well known, and Kasparov just pushes his queenside majority by playing c4 so that no weaknesses are there, and also stopping queen d3. Also bishop c2 might be to prepare something nasty here. e5 challenging the knight might be a possibility that can happen. Knight d4 from Rustam, knight c5 by Kasparov. So now three pieces are attacking this pawn, and Rustam doesn't defend that pawn, and here he plays bishop e3, and Kasparov plays e5 here. But let's see what happens if Kasparov takes this pawn by playing any knight takes e4. Let's see what happens. Let's say knight c takes e4, so then knight takes, and the same position would appear if knight f takes. And this is, I think, very dangerous for black, because after knight takes e6 he recovers his pawn back. Not only that, he's also threatening to play queen g4, and there isn't any good way to come out of that. Already there is pressure on queen, and if queen e5, then queen g4 is absolutely crushing, and black is totally gone in this position with king caught in the center, and with a bishop pair this is already hopeless. Knight f6, if queen h3, bishop c8, putting a lot of pressure on this knight, but then queen f3 is totally crushing, attacking the rook. And not to forget, this queen is in the same line as king. So after rook b8, let's say if he plays bishop f4, not only pinning but also preparing one of the rooks coming here, and this would have been end of the world for black. So bishop e3 setting a very good trap in giving up this pawn, giving up this bait, but also, you know, pulling black into a serious well from which he cannot see a light. So Kasparov is not one of those to fall into this trap, and he plays e5. Well, this is all theoretical. Everyone knows these kind of traps in these opening, especially professional chess players. They are all familiar with this repertoire. And here Rustam should have played knight f5 to exert more pressure, especially on d6 or an e7, which can and also on g7 square, restricting the development of this king's bishop for black, and so that he doesn't castle. But he plays knight f3 here, and this allows Kasparov to develop his bishop to e7, and again same thing would happen if you take the pawn. Let's see, bishop takes, and knight g5. This king is still caught in the center of the board, and if you play, let's say, bishop e7, then queen g4 is already crushing, with queen e6 landing, one of the rooks landing here. So as black, it's very important not to get greedy, because that can have serious positional consequences, and that's what Kasparov has gained playing these all professional tournaments, these top elite level tournaments, and as a budding chess player, you should always learn that if white is doing, or even if a player is giving certain piece or certain or a pawn, then there might be some backhand tactics which can arise from the position, and which can have serious consequences on the position. If this position had arisen with this king castled, then you could have attempted taking this pawn, or you could have considered taking this pawn. But this king in the middle of the board, position always looks really shaky. So you have to play bishop e7. Knight g5, too little, too late. But knight g5 could have been played earlier, or maybe knight f5, not knight g5 for that matter. But anyway, queen e2 would have been a better move, just to try to bring one of these rooks into this middle, into this open file. Perhaps that could have been considered. And here Kasparov had a very witty idea which he prepared in 2003 in a match against Deep Junior. He had this uh, plan, he had considered this position at move 17 when white plays knight g5, and there was this witty trick that he prepared, and which was short castles. And you can see there is only one defender which is defending this exchange, and that is this knight on c5. If you eliminate this knight, let's say bishop takes, and knight e6, looks like winning the exchange. However, Kasparov had prepared this, and if you try to play b4, let's consider this move, b4, then white thinks that he can take en passant, and after bishop takes, knight takes, queen c4, queen takes c4, b takes c4, this position is roughly level, and I would say this passed pawn, although this is a passed pawn, this ain't going anywhere because this is an isolated passer, and black can have serious positional weaknesses with 4 pawn islands along with 3 isolated pawns, which is not pleasant at all for black. But however, after b4, he doesn't need to take this pawn en passant. He can simply drive this knight away, and after bishop takes, h takes knight, bishop takes, queen takes, a3, rook a to d8. Black already has serious initiative in this position, and as you can see, these 3 against 2 majority on the queen side, whereas this pawn is somewhat stuck in the center of the board, not doing anything, and already there is a pressure on queen. So I think black stands better in this position. But clearly after this position, when Kasparov castled, Kasimdzhanov was really surprised looking at this move, and he didn't deal with it pretty well. Yes, he did play bishop takes c5, and after bishop takes, he does play knight e6. Kasparov plays queen b6, takes the exchange, and rook takes f8. And this is a very significant position. Kasparov is exchanged down in this position, but white's underdevelopment on the queen side and its passive pieces, and there is already a pressure on f2. Not to forget the bishop pair and this huge space advantage in the center. This gives white, or I should say black, a superb compensation. And not to forget, this rook hasn't moved yet. And the best move here that Kasimdzhanov could have tried is to play queen e2. Maybe that could have given some chance to develop this rook here to gain an open file. Position would have been still level, not white winning certainly, still level. And also not to forget this no dark square bishop, so bishop d4 can create a superb beam towards the two sides, towards these two sides, and that can be really unpleasant, more than a compensation. So Kasimdzhanov plays here knight d5, and now this is a very critical moment because knight is attacking queen, it is also attacking the other knight, offering more trades. So the question remains, which piece should you use to take? And if you use the knight to take this piece, well then e takes, bishop d4, and after queen b1 it looks like black has good structure, he might be winning, but there is pressure on h7, and somewhat miraculously white can hold this position. Although it could be very difficult, might be a possibility with this bishop pair, but still with an accurate play white can hold this. After knight d5, another thing to consider is bishop takes f2, check, And if rook takes, then bishop takes d5. If you play queen f3, then bishop f7, that would be better. But if you take the bishop, then comes knight g4 and this rook is pinned. Disastrous. You cannot take with the queen because that would land into checkmate. If queen takes, then queen takes, and once king goes here, then queen f1 check, and that will be mate in 2. So Kasparov took a good decision here, I would say prudent decision here, and he gives up one of the bishops in the bishop pair and plays bishop takes d5. Kasimdzhanov takes the bishop, and now he plays bishop takes f2 check. So pretty much more of the same, but it eventually lands up in this. He plays king h1. If rook takes f2, then knight g4 wins. So he plays king h1, and now a deadly move is coming, a deadly combination, e4 from Kasparov. He's pushing this passed pawn, and his passed pawn is faster than Kasimdzhanov's passed pawn, and there is still in the air that white can win this, but however it's very difficult, and probably this was the moment where he missed a good chance to at least try to fight for survival. He could have played d6 here, and this is a very tricky move. If black isn't careful enough, he can lose the initiative. For instance, if he plays rook d8, trying to hunt this pawn, then white has a superb strong shot, bishop takes e4. And if you play knight takes e4, obviously you cannot play knight takes e4 because queen d5 would win. But black can retreat his bishop from d4 to d4, and after queen f3, white has superb attacking chances here. And I would say white could be even winning in this position if not played carefully with the moves like rook d8. But he doesn't have to play rook d8. He can play e3, and after b3, c3, b4, just locking everything here, and now coming to d8 with queen f3. This position is slightly different, but still, again, this could have given black reasonable chances, but still the position could have been holdable and playable if played accurately, because looking at this position, black already has superb initiative and it isn't easy to find accurate moves for white, and it is very easy to make commit mistakes here. But after e4, Kasimdzhanov commits a decisive mistake, I would say, is to play queen e2, because after e3, suddenly black is absolutely raging here on this king. And you can see, what about the exchanges? Well, for exchange, he has a superb compensation with the form of this undeveloped rook and this bishop on c2 doing absolutely no job in defending this king. It isn't attacking this king either, because all its use is being neutralized by the c4 pawn, because this is not possible, and there isn't any way to drive this knight away. And white is a pawn down as well in this position. He is having a superb chances here. Probably he could have played b3, but it will still land into that same variation that we have seen. But he plays rook fd1, and already I think this position is totally lost, because he's trying to play d6, trying to create his own counterplay with this pawn, but queen d6 totally shuts it, and there isn't any good way to deal with this. And he plays now a4, and Kasparov said after the game that when he saw this move a4, he knew that white is totally lost. He's trying to develop this rook towards the a file to generate some counterplay, but this is already too slow. He could have possibly played rook d4, but that also wouldn't have helped. Probably given him chances, but still, and Kasparov's initiative on this white king is way too powerful. And here Kasparov comes up with a very tricky plan, or I should say very good plan, and he plays g6. And h5 would also been great, but g6 is preparing something very big here. Kasimdzhanov takes, exchanges to open this rook at least, to initiate some counterplay if ever there is, by opening this file. And here there are two ways to play this position, but I would say no move would help white in here. Let's say if you play rook d4, but then comes queen e5, rook a to d1, trying to develop desperately the other rook as well. And now Kasparov has this beautiful shot up his sleeve, bishop g3. And if this is taken, then knight h5 is simply killer. There's already threat of taking this pawn, and king g1 doesn't help because this also drops, and rook is already closing this file. What a superb combination this is. And also after a takes b5, b3 doesn't help either, because after knight h5, queen g4, stopping this nasty trick. There comes this another shot, rook f4, so creating more and more pressure. So he might try to play queen e6 to exchange the queens, but it doesn't matter because after d takes e6, e2 is simply crushing. And there's already a threat to play rook h4 and then knight g3 mate. Not to forget, there is this pressure here, and white forces are looking really helpless. It's almost defenseless position for white. After a takes b5, he plays g3 to do something of his king. But now Kasparov plays another spectacular move, knight h5. This is what he prepared when he played g6. Queen g4, trying to play queen e6 check. And here comes this another move, bishop takes g3. Brilliant stuff, one after another. And again, queen e6 doesn't help too much because then e2 is simply crushing. He takes the bishop, knight takes g3 check, and now there are three ways. Of course, queen takes, then queen takes. King can go to these three squares. If he goes to h2, well, this is disastrous because after knight f1, king g1, queen h2 is checkmate. After this check, if he goes to g1, but then comes e2, queen e6 check, queen takes, d takes, e takes d1 equals queen, and after rook takes d1, you can see black is 2 pawns up, and this e6 pawn is going nowhere. It can simply be tracked down with this king and this rook, and this is already hopeless. This is, I would say, objectively lost position. But king, after looking at the next one, king g1 would have been a better try, but Rustam plays king g2, and this was a clear mistake because now Kasparov's forces crashes through. Rook f2 check, king h3, and there isn't no immediate attack, and now white is threatening to exchange queens, and also this check on back rank is also could be a possible concern. So he stops this check, knight f5. Brilliant move again by Kasparov, not only stopping queen e6 but also preparing queen h2 checkmate. And if he tries, like, let's say rook a8, but then after king g7, rook a7 check, king f6, there aren't any checks, and this is a simple threat. And even rook here is also checkmate, so either queen or rook coming to h2 is a threat. So rook a6 is not possible because this will be mate, And this is somewhat a peculiar situation in which white is caught, and isn't any good move here. Rook h1 is probably the move which can save, and Kasparov could have taken this bishop, and that would also be winning. But h5 is also a killer. You don't have to take everything just because you can. You can simply play h5. Even that is winning. Perhaps an inaccuracy from Kasparov's point of view, but he has already done the hard job. And by playing h5 instead of rook takes c2 doesn't change one bit. White is simply lost. He tries queen takes g6 check. Queen takes rook at g1. The queen is pinned, but it doesn't matter. You take the rook. Rook takes, and after king f7, Kasimdzhanov resigns the game. Wow, what a superb game, worthy of number 7, and proved that he is the world champion. And this was the point. This was the main point of this game, because Kasimdzhanov was the FIDE champion, and to beating FIDE champion in this fashion, it was somewhat a huge statement for Kasparov and for FIDE as well. Bishop takes, then you can simply play f2. No point of hurrying, and there is no time to play bishop d3 because c pawn is controlling that, and that would be the end of the game. And what a superb game from Garry Kasparov, and he retired after this tournament, which was pretty much a giveaway. He still was playing at his peak, but he had achieved everything. I would be showing you another game from this Linares, which is also memorable, and at what number would that be? You will come to know after that. But anyway, I hope you liked the video. I hope you liked the analysis that I've given you. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, stay at home, and cheers. Tada, see you later.